Hi, folks. In this video, we check out a new existentialist, Jean-Paul Sartre, and his play No Exit. Sartre is probably the most famous existentialist, the poster child for the movement, because he's one of the few existentialists who actually takes on the name and is willing to call himself an existentialist, whereas some later existentialists like Camus didn't like to be called that, and a lot of the existentialists who I really think of as the core folks that we're reading in this course, like Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, Kierkegaard, didn't even call themselves existentialists. The term hardly even existed then. So he is, in many ways, one of the paragons of the movement. And he also provides a really fantastic counterpoint to Dostoevsky. And that's what we're going to examine by checking out some of the themes in No Exit. So there's just 4 characters. This is a small play. It takes place in one act, and it's all just in one small room. The valet is sort of like a devil figure. He's probably some little minion. He's a low-level demon. But notice how genteel he is. He actually reminds me a lot of the devil figures in the Brothers Karamazov. Now, there's 3 humans who are sort of condemned to hell here. So Garcin, who is a journalist and was executed for running away from the military. We have Inés. She's a less well-off. She's a working-class woman in Paris. Who just died recently, who was killed by her lover. And then finally we have Estelle, who just died from pneumonia, and she is sort of an upper class, representing like a bourgeois woman in Paris. Now, in order to understand the philosophical import of this play, you have to get a little bit of the plot. So I'm going to review and make sure that you didn't miss anything. Of course, these 3 folks are all confined to hell, and this tiny little room that none of them can leave is hell for them. So the meaning of the title, the translated title, No Exit, is just the idea that they can't ever leave that room. That's a literal significance of it. But then there's no escaping from hell. That's meaning number 2. On a third level, though, this is really not just telling us about what's happening in hell. This is, this play is obviously a metaphor for us in our lives now. So really, hell is significant and expressive of the human condition. And there's no escaping the human condition for us, which is full of anguish and torture. And we'll see exactly why that is, according to Sartre. No Exit is not the literal translation of the play's title, but I actually think it's one of the few cases where the translators came up with a fantastic title. I think it fits really well. Of course, Sartre's original title in French is also fantastic. It's full of double meanings too. Behind Closed Doors, Huis Clos, is also a fantastic title. So this is one of the few cases where I actually like both titles. Behind Closed Doors literally refers to the fact that these folks, their torture occurs in this room behind the closed doors, but it also, behind closed doors, this carries a metaphorical meaning of privacy. Those are the kind of things we try to keep hidden. And the whole point of the play is actually you cannot keep hidden from others. Others, we are under their scrutiny all of the time, whether dead or alive. It's inescapable, and it is its own form of torture. Okay, now let's return to some of the key points of the plot so we can make sure you understand what's happening. The first thing that happens is they don't know each other, and they can't understand why they're all in the same room together. So they try to make sense of it. And this is one of the reasons which motivates them sort of confessing or attempting to fess up and tell each other why they're there. So Garcin says, for example, we have to know why we're here. That's the only way we're going to be able to make sense of our situation and see why they threw all of us together. Estelle, she's the naive one. She says something like, I can't imagine why it happens. There must be some sort of mistake. And Inés is the more perceptive one. Inés actually oftentimes has the deepest insights of the play. So you really got to keep an eye out for what lines she speaks. And sometimes she actually speaks the truth without knowing it. And there's a bit of authorial irony here. For example, at the beginning, she walks in when Garcel's already there, and she's mad at him, or she's just waiting, asking him when he's going to get started. And he doesn't understand what she's talking about. She thinks he's the torturer. And the irony here is, of course, she's wrong. She's mistaken who he is. He's just another one of the humans. But he actually is the torturer. They don't get it at that point, but there's another level of irony there, because what she does is actually speak the truth. But later on, she speaks the truth, and knowingly in many points in the play. She realizes there's nothing left to chance here. This has all been designed carefully. In many ways, the double irony here is perhaps in the way in which this functions metaphorically for us in our lives. It hasn't been designed. And Sartre, unlike Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky, is an arch atheist. And so he doesn't think there's any divine hand in it. And part of his existential philosophy follows precisely because there is no divine God-given meaning. We have to construct it ourselves, but we do so ineffectually. And so everything is left to chance, but yet it's torture nonetheless. So in many ways, there's a lot of irony going in both directions here. So what they do is they agree that they have to fess up to why they're there. And Ine realizes this is going to be hard. You know, that's why she says, if only we actually had the guts to tell each other. Well, they think they do. And in fact, they don't, though. It's just complete denial. You know, Estelle can't even imagine why they're there. I haven't the foggiest idea. There must be some mistake. Garcon, you know, acts like he's there because he's a deserter. In fact, we later learn that he's a horrible person and he treats his wife horribly. The reading that I gave you, excerpts, is only actually about half of it. So if you want to read the whole play, you can find it easily online. We learn more of Garcon and all the characters' backstories in the other parts. I tried to give you the most pithy part to make the reading manageable. But he is really a horrible person, just as much as the others. And it's actually for the reasons how he treats his wife is why he's damned. But he acts like it's just because he was, you know, running away from the military. And Ine, she's the one who realizes, no, actually, you are both just in denial. But still, she doesn't feel like fessing up at this early stage either. Now, what happens, because they can't be honest with each other, they attempt to solve their problems alone. And so what Garcon does is he says, like, okay, everybody, let's all just get on our own couches. There's 3 couches here. Let's all just get on our own couches, live in our own private little afterlives, forget about each other, and maybe we'll be okay. We can suffer through this and we'll be okay. But it turns out to be impossible. And all they do is torment each other. And then they start fighting and they just get angry at each other. And Ine, characteristically, is the one who figures it out. You know, after they keep fighting, there's pages of this. She's like, oh, now I get it. I understand what they're after. You know, I think this is really well written too. An economy of manpower, or an economy of devil power. This nice image metaphor. It's like the cafeteria. It's self-service, where all the customers just take care of themselves. So in fact, this is Sartre's central conceit of the play. This is the hook. This is the nifty tagline that really, they are the torturers from each other, and that humans torture each other and lead to our own misery. All right, now let me pause here. That reviews a bunch of the basic plot points so that everybody's on the same page. Now I want you to do is think a little bit about the philosophical views, the existentialist views of Sartre that come across in this. So I really mean you to pause your videos and try to locate Sartre in our existentialist conceptual space here, according to these dimensions, which we've already looked at for Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky. So we have the social individual dimension, and we have the religious and natural dimension. So pause your videos, and I really want you to try to think of, as much as you can, you know, elaborate in your own minds or on a piece of paper, what are the central theses about the human condition Sartre is getting at before we go on. Okay, that was your chance to pause your videos. So I'm going to give you some of the broader elements of Sartre's view, and then connect them in some of the other readings, and then connect them to what's going on in this play. The tagline that I'm going to be after is the concept of freedom is absolutely essential for Sartre. We have freedom, or at least we have the capacity to choose actions under the guise of freedom, as if they seem free to us, even if they are completely determined. But instead of being liberating, that freedom is actually a curse and is a source of torment to us. So really, Sartre has this famous line, "We are condemned to be free." This is something that connects with the central elements of No Exit. So let me give you a little bit of background here. The idea is freedom creates a kind of responsibility for us. This is the human condition. And we can't divest that responsibility by saying that God has a divine plan, or God created me with a certain purpose. God had an image when he created humans, just like humans have an image when we create a hammer. Because when we fashion artifacts, according to Sartre, we have a kind of plan that defines their essence. And things like hammers are defined by their function. If they can pound in nails, that makes something a hammer. And something is a bad hammer insofar as it performs that function poorly. Like a hammer made of rubber would not do very well as a hammer, and we could call it a bad hammer. There are standards or norms by which we can judge the quality or performance of hammers. Well, if humans had a creator, an artisan, just like we are the artisans of hammers, then humans would have a function or an essence. And that would allow us to judge when humans are acting well or performing well, what's an excellent human or not. Instead, there is no such thing. This is the unfortunate plight of us. And so we have the responsibility to create our own image. But that's terrifying, that's painful, and we're not very good at it. So we actually, we have this freedom, which is touted in theological terms as an ultimate good. Remember the standard Christian responses to the problem of evil that Yvonne was examining in Rebellion and Grand Inquisitor. Freedom justifies all of the horrible things happening on earth. Well, if Sartre is right, actually freedom is the source of all of these horrible things. So Sartre, in one of his essays that examines existentialism explicitly, I highly recommend Googling it, and you can get a copy of it easily. Existentialism is a humanism. Sartre expresses that famous line that we are condemned to be free. And we see this over and over in the play No Exit. The characters can't, they flee responsibility. They don't take responsibility for their actions on earth and the reasons that they are damned. They don't take responsibility for the way that they're treating each other now. They can't even fess up and be honest with the reasons why they're there and talk and connect to each other. They can't make decisions. Later on, Garçon is trying to figure out whether he deserted or not, or whether he lives up to this stereotypical conception of manlyhood, and he can't figure it out. He is destroyed. He is rendered impotent, or he's rendered immobile because of his inability to make decisions. And this really expresses in dramatic form, in fictional form, exactly what Sartre thought was happening with humans. Let me give you some other quotes. In this essay, Existentialism as a Humanism, Sartre actually ties it in with Kierkegaard. And so I thought this is really nice, because now you know so much, you understand all the background that Sartre is referring to here. Remember, Kierkegaard talked about the anguish that Abraham would experience. And if we just accept the Sunday school version of Abraham as the father of faith that we get from Christianity, Kierkegaard thinks we can't actually realize the terrible anguish, the absurd anguish that somebody like Abraham must face. And that's what Sartre is talking about here. And what Sartre says is, to emphasize this devastating power of having to make choices, which we try to constantly flee from by looking for external sources of value. He says, what the trouble is, even if it is God who's talking to me, that doesn't help, because I have to make these decisions. And that means I have to be willing to accept that responsibility. And this is what humans have such a difficult time doing. Okay, let me give you one or two other key ideas from Sartre that are in the background of his play here to help round out some of the philosophical significance. Another key idea of Sartre's is, given his atheism, we don't have a kind of immortal soul that provides something over and above our human biological bodily lives that are, 80 years on this earth. And so really what we are not some immortal soul that's going to live on in the afterlife. You are just this biological organism that's here for about 80 years, plus or minus some. And once you're dead, you're gone, and that's it. So what makes up you is just the totality of these events. And that means that the actions, the decisions that you make, that is, in a sense, your essence. Your essence is determined by how you decide to exist in this short span that you have available to you. So Inez is the person who actually says several of these really key Sartrean ideas. She says, like, you are nothing else. All you are is what you do. That shows what you're made of. This sort of is like actions speak louder than words. Garcet is saying all these things like, oh yeah, I believed in pacifism, and that is the noble thing. That's what a true man would have done in my situation. But he knows he's just speaking the lie, and And she says, look, you turned tail and ran like a coward. You know you're a coward. You just can't fess up to it. And your actions actually are what condemn you. Your own decisions are the judgment on you. And so she says, like, you are your life and nothing else. This is consonant with this is exact same Sartrean idea. One of the most famous quotes, so that humans are condemned to be free, is one of Sartre's two most famous existentialist quotes. The other is this one that existence precedes essence. And if you Google, like, what is existentialism, you often get this, as if that's going to help explain everything. I think this is actually not that insightful or enlightening of an idea, but the way, and it's also not very clear at all what it means. And that's why I think it makes a pretty terrible nutshell definition of existentialism. What I think Sartre is getting at here is the idea that I said, in light of there is no creator for us, we have no essence, unlike what the hammer might have. And that means, that connects with these ideas that I've bolded in blue, that really our essence, we have no essence in the traditional sense. And so our essence, like you should put it in scare quotes or something, whatever essence we have is just created by the decisions that we happen to make in our lives. How we choose to exist is really just what defines the meaning of what our life is, because there is no grand purpose or deeper meaning to it. And so here's some other ideas that I think are actually more enlightening than that famous quote. Humans are nothing else but that which they make of themselves. That is the first principle of existentialism. I think that's a clear statement of what Sartre is actually getting at. One last Sartrean idea. So I've given you a couple already. So idea number one, let's just review, was the idea that we are oppressed by freedom. And freedom is the fundamental aspect of the human condition. Number two, there is nothing else to our lives. We are just the sum of our actions. And number three has to do with the relation between us and others. So the distinction between the subject and the object was really crucial for Sartre, because these things that we've talked about previously, that's the subject side. That we have this freedom, that is how we experience ourselves as subjects. But we are also objects. We are constrained by we are bodies, just like this, body and mind dualism. And we are bodies determined by physical forces, and we are bodies. So we cannot escape the fact that we are also objects existing in a world full of physical objects. And when we relate to others, this becomes apparent to us. And this is terrible, because what we would like to be is we would like to be gods who are sort of like this ideal of pure subjectivity, who don't have to deal with being objects and being bodies. And this conception of gods as one half of the human duality is really an interesting way of thinking about the troubles of being humans. We wish we weren't. And this is actually a key theme that I've talked about extensively with Dostoevsky. So the trouble with others in Sartre's mind is they see me as an object, and I realize I see them as objects. So our connection with other humans actually is a constant threat. And the fact that we can't escape each other means that this constant threat and the torment and misery that it realizes is part of being social beings. And that's what's unfortunate about being humans. This obviously is one of the central themes of No Exit. This is how we are torturing each other, not just in this fictitious hell, but this is, of course, a metaphor for the human condition on Earth and the way that our lives are being led. And Ine is, of course, the one who says this in many places. I'm watching you. Everybody's watching. Oh, this is one of my favorite lines. I'm a crowd all by myself. One other human is enough to objectify me and oppress me. And of course, it's completely inescapable. How could I forget you? Forget the others? That's ridiculous. That's absurd. I feel you in every pore. Even your silence is like clamoring, a cacophony in my ears. And so what turns out is the reason this is torture for these people, the reason they are in hell, is because they need something from each other and they cannot get it. So here's my sense of the situation that I'm hoping you could glean from reading the play. Ine, this is an interesting case where, there was still strong social stigmatism against being gay in France in the 1940s, let alone, you might be familiar with the kind of oppression people faced in the Anglo-American world. So Ine is an openly gay character, which is interesting. Although she's also rendered sort of stereotypically because she's wicked as well. So I think it's a complicated piece, and it has sort of virtues and vices to it on Sartre's play. But Ine's character is in love or desires Estelle and seeks acknowledgement in realizing the relationship with her. So they have this kind of love triangle. Estelle, of course, seeks Garçon, seeks his acknowledgement. She wants to be loved and acknowledged by him, and Garçon, for various reasons, finds no reconciliation with Estelle, and instead he needs it from Ine. And I'll talk in the next video about why that is exactly. In a sense, he has this conception of masculinity which he cannot live up to, and he realizes Ine's the only one here who has the insight to understand him and what he needs. And so if she can just give him that kind of acknowledgement, that would allow him to heal his soul. Of course she won't. And so hence we have this sort of, it's an attempted love triangle. And in fact, it's actually a triangle of misery and a complete failure of acknowledgement between any of them. So hopefully you can see already how this might relate to some of the key themes from Dostoevsky. But I'll leave off here and I'll talk about that in another video. Thanks.